Now, I want to return to The Voice. The latest polling from Essential shows that 48% of Australians will vote no at the referendum, 42% saying they're going to vote yes. Like News Poll, the Essential data shows the only demographic for which The Voice enjoys majority support is people aged under 35. Joining me to get the latest on this and much more is senior writer and columnist with the Herald Sun, Patrick Carline, and media writer at the Australian newspaper, Sophie Elsworth. Guys, this data is quite interesting. What do you make of it, Sophie? It follows News Poll. News Poll data was very surprising indeed in some areas because the drop in support in areas for like under 35s, for tertiary educated, categories where The Voice has enjoyed strong support in the past, that I think would really disturb the Yes campaigners, that they're the areas that we're counting on a majority support.
Absolutely, Rita, and I think now as we get closer to the referendum, obviously we know the date now, there's end in sight of when it will be. People are starting to engage if they already, were tuned out from it. They're starting to hear more about it. They want to know about it because they know they have to cast their vote. And I think the more people know, the more questions they have about it. And I think that is working to a disadvantage to the Yes camp. But as I've said to you, Rita, many times, I would not be sitting in the no camp thinking they have this in the bag by any stretch.
That's a good point, Patrick. It's important that the no camp do not become complacent. We have said on this program repeatedly, the Yes camp has got all the advantages. They've got this massive war chest, reportedly around $100 million, maybe more, all that corporate money. That is a lot of advertising people are going to be bombarded with, Patrick, in the coming weeks.
Absolutely, and I think the Yes campaign has improved dramatically in the last few weeks. You look at someone like Noel Pearson, who 6 months ago was sounding very, divisive and angry about the whole thing. He now sounds very articulate and very warm and very embracing in a way that...
It's funny that, isn't it? So
yes, that's right.
You're telling me when the Yes vote was winning easily and it was like 2 in 3 Australians were saying we're going to vote yes.
Yes.
We were seeing a very different Noel Pearson than we're seeing now, that the Yes vote is faltering.
Absolutely. But I think against that, look, the numbers are heavily stacked against the Yes campaign. They've got to make up. I mean, the hard no vote, according to this latest poll, is very strong. They're not going to turn. They're not for changing. And basically, it's such a narrow margin of sort of navigation to get through and actually win this. And I think you look at the Dutton sort of strategy, you had that great line, if you don't know, vote no. That could have applied to the Republican campaign back in '99. Yeah. It would have been just as effective. And I think that has cut through. And I think there is a fatigue for talking about The Voice at all. It has been going for so long.
I think there certainly is fatigue, but you're right, that Essential data looked at the soft yes and the soft no, those who were for changing, and found that there were more yes voters who were open to changing their mind than there were no voters. So that itself is quite fascinating. Now, today in Question Time, Deputy Liberal leader Susan Ley questioned the government again on the Uluru Statement after a new book by the Voice architect Megan Davis and Pat Anderson admitted that the full statement is 15 pages, not a single page. But let's have a listen to the Prime Minister's response.
Does the Prime Minister still maintain the Uluru Statement is just one page and that any suggestions otherwise are conspiracy theory and nonsense?
Wait till they reveal the secret verses of You're the Voice by John Farnham. Megan Davis has made it very clear that the Uluru Statement is one page.
Order.
What we have here is a whole range of meeting minutes, effectively, of the hundreds of meetings that took place in the lead up to Uluru.
Oh, gosh, he's very up and about for a man who admits he hasn't actually read the full Uluru Statement.
Rita, I think the Prime Minister is just hoping Australians will look at that pretty poster, which I think is quite pretty with all the colours, 439 words, I think it is, and think That is it. And we have reported on this network and across many of our papers that there is more to the Uluru Statement than that one pretty page on a poster. And they're the pages Australians need to read, Rita, because that's where the detail is that explains and talks about things like reparations. Australians need to know this.
Absolutely. But Patrick, how does the PM reconcile with the fact that there is video of the voice architects talking about the document being more than a single page? How does he say this is a wild conspiracy theory and only crazy people believe this, when the people who he has chosen to put this together say it's more than a page?
Well, he says he's only read one page, so perhaps it is only one page. Look, that is the problem, though, isn't it? That we don't know what it is and what it is not, and that's never been enunciated in a way that people actually are comfortable with. And you sort of, is this a three-trick sort of deal? Is it the voice and the treaty and reparations, or is it just the voice? And that really played to the no camp's strategies of just creating confusion and doubt about the whole process. People don't necessarily trust that it is exactly as it's being presented.
Well, I think great Australian historian Geoffrey Blainey said it best when he said this is a militant document. It is not a soft document all about reconciliation and coming together. You actually read it and it is a militant. Even that single page has got elements that are troubling. Now let's go to Qantas. It's been a horror week for the national carrier. The ACCC is going after the airline for selling tickets for flights that had already been cancelled. The Albanese government is under fire for banning extra capacity for Qatar Airways, something Alan Joyce said would distort the market. And now we've got Alan Joyce gone to Sophie. Now the pressure's turned to the chairman, Richard Goyder, and the rest of the board. Will they be able to withstand that pressure?
I don't think so, Rita. I mean, Alan Joyce was going to have this marvellous send-off. He was going to be the hero of the year. You know, he'd done all such good for the Australian public, and that's absolutely ended in tears. He never wanted to leave 2 months early. What a disaster, Rita. And I think it's been very damaging for the federal government, particularly Mr Albanese, to stand with him just last month and support the Yes campaign alongside the stickers. And I mean, Alan Joyce is the most despised CEO, I would argue, in the country right now. Why would the government be aligning themselves with him? Foolish. But I think the spotlight will now be on the new CEO and also particularly the board.
Well, there's also this perception, Patrick, that the government's running a protection racket for Qantas by stopping competition, enforcing this oligopoly, having domestic travellers paying more than they need to be. It's not a good look, and if we do have a proper inquiry into that Qatar decision, we might get some answers we're not comfortable with.
Well, no one understands the Qatar decision except the federal government, allegedly. They can't explain it, and Qantas. And that's what's really struck me about this, is this has been in the news for a couple of weeks, and there hasn't actually been a good answer to actually tell
We've
us.
had about 5 answers from Catherine King, which have just made the situation worse.
Well, Catherine King said this: I made the decision in the public interest. Well, aren't cheap seats in the public interest? Yeah. Isn't tourism in the public interest? It doesn't actually add up. There is a smell about it, and we deserve to know more.
Absolutely. Now, more bad PR for Qantas. A 78-year-old Vietnam veteran who was travelling with Qantas on Sunday was booted out of his business class seat that he paid for so a young Qantas employee could fly in business. Apparently, it's part of his entitlements in the enterprise agreement. Here was the veteran, Stephen Jones, earlier this morning.
I don't think anything's going to change until there's ramifications for Qantas or costs for Qantas when they upset their customers.
Sophie, where's the common sense? Where is the common decency? I mean, how do you kick a veteran out of a seat he's paid for? His poor wife had to sit next to this young Qantas employee who would not make eye contact with her, allegedly.
Rita, this is really appalling stuff.
It is.
And Qantas just seem, don't relate to the Australian public. They just seem to have disaster after disaster after disaster. They're too busy virtue signalling. They're too busy telling us vote yes. They're too busy doing welcome to countries on flights. Yesterday I was on a flight. They didn't even have enough food on the flight. They were scrounging around trying to find us peanuts because they didn't have enough cheese and crackers. It's just always a disaster with them. They need to go back to Rita. You fly them a lot. Good customer service.
Every week, twice a week. So, Qantas are a budget carrier right now that are charging premium rates. So you're paying through the nose and you expect to get a certain level of service, but you won't be getting it, not at the moment. So I really do hope this new CEO, who's from inside the company, which troubles me because she's been there, she's been part of this culture that's wrecked the joint. Hopefully she's got a new approach. Patrick, I mean, you pay business class and probably don't travel that often. It's a treat. And to have airline employee come up to you and, sorry, mate, you've been bumped because we've got some 23-year-old who wants to be in the pointy end of the plane. Come on.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, 10 years ago, this wouldn't have happened with Qantas. You trusted Qantas. This story, the saddest thing about it is it doesn't surprise you at all, does it? You just hear these stories again and again and again. And I think they gave him, 5,000 frequent flyer sort of points. Where does that get you to?
Literally nowhere. 5,000 points isn't even enough to go from Melbourne to Sydney in economy with Jetstar, let alone with Qantas. So it's an insult to be giving him that. I mean, at least give him and his wife a couple of business class fares, the one they took from him. At least give him something to compensate for this... well, it's just like you said, it wouldn't have happened in the old days because you would have had common sense, you would have had staff who would have known better and wouldn't allow this sort of thing to damage the company's reputation. Sophie Elsworth, Patrick Carline, thank you so much for joining me.